It reminds me of that story, Jay Papasan and Gary Keller in The One Thing, the book The One Thing. Have you read that one?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, they have that story in there where they're talking about glass. I think he's actually quoting like a Stephen King book, but they're talking about these balls. Yeah, like you're juggling a lot of things: work, family, health, relationships. Like all the stuff you're juggling. But he says some of those balls are made of glass and some are made of rubber. And so you can drop some of them and they'll bounce right back. Like your career, your job, your business, like especially when you have kids, right? Like family first. Like when I no longer have kids in the house, I'll be able to work 100-hour work weeks, and I might want to because that might be fun. But right now, that is a glass ball that I'm not allowed to drop. And same with health, right? Like you can sacrifice, you can sacrifice your health and not eat right, and because you're trying to make money, but that doesn't bounce back all the time. So yeah, just keeping that in mind is.
Well, let's talk about health real quick, because I had profound gains once I started focusing on eating right. And we were talking about the 4 burners theory.
Yeah.
If you increase your health burner, like that gives you more fuel for your other
other ones, right? Yeah.
And I discovered this in 2014. I think it was my buddy David Siteman Garland. He got a 6-pack, and that was something that I always wanted.
Yeah.
And I was like, how did you do it? Because before I asked him, I was just doing sit-ups.
Yeah.
Eating the same, just doing sit-ups. And he said, it's all about what you eat. And once I started eating right, and we just had lunch here. Normally, I don't eat a burrito. But,
sure, yep. All right, whatever. Awkward.
Just a little indication of how you eat normally.
I had a salad. I don't know what you had.
And salad and fries, right? Is that what you had?
I had no fries today, but it wasn't a salad. It was a bowl, and that's not very good for you. Whatever.
But it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't get food coma.
Uh-huh.
And so I cut out carbs for the most part. That's how I did it. And I got that 6-pack. For only like a month. It's actually impossible to maintain unless you really eat right. But once I cut out carbs, like I'm super productive. I can go all day and be super efficient.
Yeah, same.
And so that's like the first thing I would focus on, actually.
That's really good. Today. All right, so that's your best health tip. Let's talk family tip. You got 2 kids. They're very smart, and they're 2 kids, right?
I got 2 kids.
2 kids. They're very gifted, smart. What's your advice for me with somebody with younger kids? What do I do next?
Here's the thing. Here's what I believe. Your kids aren't going to realistically want to hang out with you all the time. Like I'm around all the time. I think you just have to be present, right? Like they're not going to want to hang out with you all the time, and you're probably not going to want to hang out with them all the time. The people who talk about family, it's not realistic. But as long as you're there for them. So I go to all their games. I go to all their performances. And as long as they see you there, that actually means something. Because I know, I mentioned my parents were first-generation immigrants, so they didn't actually go to my volleyball games as often as would have liked. And my friends would see their parents on the sidelines, and I'd look over, and they weren't there. And I always remembered that. Not that I blamed them for anything, but I remembered that to the point where I'm not missing anything. So my daughter was in The Sound of Music. I was in the front row for all of those performances, every single one of them. And
That's good, man. Just being present, just so they can see you, it's sometimes enough. Reminds me of a buddy of mine, Qasim, who I plan to get on this podcast at some point soon. He told me this really profound thing, and it's so simple. He said, he's got young kids like me, so kind of 3, 4, 5, I don't know, somewhere in that range. He said, when I walk by them, they always say the same thing to me. Daddy, can you play with me? Daddy, will you play with me? And he's like, I always say the same. He would always say, I can't. And I do the same thing to my kids. I can't right now. I'm working. I can't. I'm on a phone call. Sorry, I got to go to do this thing. I'm always in the middle of something when I walk by them. But he said, just give them 1 minute. He's like, 1 minute to fill their cup. And so he said, even if I'm in the middle of a call and I had to run to the restroom real quick, and the guy's waiting for me, he's like, what's more important, 1 minute with my kid or 1 minute with that person I don't know on the other end of a Zoom call? He's like, so I give him 1 minute, and I sit down with my kid, and I say, okay, I'm going to play with you for 1 minute, then I go back to my call. And the kid's always excited. And he's like, 9 times out of 10, that 1 minute's enough. They don't even care after. It's like, thanks, Dad. And you just filled their cup up real quick. And so it's not always about I've spent 6 hours playing Legos with my kid, and now I spent quality time with them. It's just, are you available? Do they see you? Do you acknowledge them? Give them fill that cup up, and then move on. So yeah.
I actually remind them constantly, their life is not normal. Whenever they need something, I'm there, and they'll just ask for it. We're not always hanging out 24/7, but I just remind them that that's not normal, right? Yeah. The lifestyle that we created allows them to just have me always available. So my daughter, she's a setter for her team, and I used to set for my volleyball team. So she'll just ask me in the middle of the day, hey, will you just set with me? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I'll go set with you. Yeah. Or we'll just go set up the net, and I'll set for her if she wants to hit and that sort of thing. And it doesn't take long. It's not every day, but when she asks, I'll say yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely won't, I don't want to be the, like, obviously the spoil the parent thing, but I want my kids to know that, like, I say yes to them. Like that, like, daddy's not always too busy to say yes or to take a minute to play. And it's easy to forget that because I'm just so busy with, like, oh, I got to do that call. I got to do that podcast. I got to do that, a meeting, whatever that is. And yeah.
I mean, it got so bad with me that one time, and this is when I was trying to hit 7 figures.
Yeah.
We went to Disneyland, and my wife snapped a picture of me checking email on the Dumbo ride.
Oh.
There's a picture. And I was like, okay, yeah, this has got to change.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
that's rough, man.
So.
All right. So we've covered a lot of stuff: business, fitness, parenting, marriage. You gave some marriage advice. Don't work with your spouse. But what else you got for me there?
For marriage?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is our 20-year anniversary this year.
Congrats, man.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you a story that I probably haven't told anyone yet. But there was a point where things weren't good, and you kind of get into this situation sometimes in marriage where, like, you're mad at this person, and they're mad at you, and it just kind of spirals, because no one's willing to give in.
Yep.
And we kind of got in that mode when we were running our business. And then I'm just going to give a shout out to my buddy Tall. He was like, hey, Steve, you should have the conversation with her and just tell her how much you appreciate her. And I was like, oh, yeah, whatever. We're fine. We're good. Like, we're not fighting or anything, but we just weren't, like, communicating as well. So this guy, Tall, he literally would call me, like, every other day saying, hey, did you have the conversation yet? Did you have the conversation yet? Did you have the conversation yet? This was during COVID.
Yeah.
And I was like, fine, I'm going to have this freaking conversation. And so my wife and I went on this walk, and I told her, hey, I really appreciate, I just want to let you know, like, no matter what, I really appreciate everything, how you're there for the kids, everything that you do for me, how you're so considerate about everything. 180 after that.
Wow.
Her attitude changed. She was no longer, like, yelling at everyone. My attitude changed because, I wasn't getting yelled at anymore. And it's been great ever since. So my advice would be to just take some time just to express gratitude for who your spouse is. Because I'm not good at that. Like, Asians don't do that. Asians don't believe in therapy. They don't believe in talking to people. Like feelings.
Yeah.
Like it's just the way I was raised. I don't want to speak for all Asians, but it's just the traditional upbringing is, you hide your feelings, you bury them, right?
Yeah.
And that's bad.
Yeah.
Especially bad for marriage.
Yeah.
So
just acknowledging somebody and saying thank you, like, just goes so far. Yeah, I've had jobs in the past where, like, they just don't. All I want to do is be acknowledged. Like, it's not even about like in the workplace. I'm just like, just tell me I did a good job. Like, that's all I want to know. But I don't want to say that. That's weird to say out loud. So, like, it's a good thing to know as an entrepreneur, as well as a husband and a father. Just acknowledging, like, hey, I'm grateful for you. I saw what you did there. That was a cool thing. Appreciate that. It just goes so far for people in relationships.
And I think everyone has their own buckets, right? Like the love languages.
Yep.
My wife just happens to be, words of
affirmation.
Yeah. So you just got to figure out what that is.